The plaza was silent, so silent that even the clicking of camera shutters felt like thunder. Rows of tourists stood shoulder to shoulder, their eyes fixed on a single figure in front of the tomb of the unknown soldier. The guard, flawless in his pressed uniform, stood as if carved from stone, eyes forward, rifle balanced, every movement measured by discipline older than any man alive. And then the crowd parted. A tall figure strode through, his boots clicking against the stone walkway. The air seemed to change with him, pride, arrogance, and something darker. A Russian colonel, chest heavy with medals, jaw tight with authority. He didn't slow, he didn't bow his head. Instead, he smirked as if the silence itself was beneath him. Watch this, a tourist whispered, raising a phone. The guard didn't flinch. His orders were clear. No matter what happened, he stood his ground. That silence was sacred. That ground was holy. His stillness was a living salute to every soldier who never came home. But the colonel, he saw only a man in uniform. Someone to command, someone to bend. His footsteps echoed louder, sharper, until he stood only feet away. His shadow cut across the guard's path like a challenge written in darkness. The crowd shifted nervously. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve. Veterans clenched their jaws, sensing disrespect before it even arrived. Reporters leaned closer, cameras trembling in their hands. And then it came. The colonel raised his chin, scoffed, and barked in a thick accent. "You there? Salute me." For a heartbeat, the world froze. Even the birds overhead seemed to vanish into the silence. Every eye locked on the guard. Would he obey? Would he step aside? The guard did nothing. He did not blink. He did not breathe. His stillness itself was louder than the colonel's order, but the colonel wasn't finished. He stepped closer, boots scraping stone, medals clinking with every arrogant move. The tension snapped tighter, like a rope ready to break. The tourists weren't watching a ceremony anymore. They were watching a battle fought without weapons, without shouts, without movement. And in that razor-thin silence, one truth hovered over the crowd. The colonel thought power would force obedience, but what the world was about to see was what honor truly means. The guard's stillness was not born in a day. It was carved in him, line by line, from the battles he carried within his heart. Years before he ever stepped onto the plaza of Arlington, he had walked a very different kind of stone-dusty, broken roads halfway across the world. He was a young infantryman then, barely 20, with a brother by his side. They were inseparable, two soldiers, one dream, to serve, to protect, to come home together. But war doesn't honor dreams. In a single flash of fire and thunder, his brother was gone. The memory was as sharp as yesterday, the ringing in his ears, the sight of a helmet lying in the dirt, the unbearable silence that followed. That day, something inside him shattered, and from the broken pieces, a vow was born. When he returned, he chose a duty unlike any other, the tomb guard. He would give his life to honor those who could not speak, those who never came home, those whose names were lost but whose sacrifices echoed forever. Every step he took, every measured turn, every click of his heel against the stone was not just ceremony, it was a promise whispered to his fallen brother. You will not be forgotten. None of you will ever be forgotten. The training was brutal. Hours of standing motionless under burning sun and freezing rain. Uniforms inspected with ruthless precision. One thread out of place was failure. Steps practiced until each measured pace was identical to the last. There was no room for hesitation, no space for weakness. But he endured it all, because stillness had become his weapon, silence had become his shield. And so, when he finally took his post at Arlington, he wasn't just a guard. He was the living embodiment of respect, the embodiment of sacrifice, a sentinel not only of stone, but of memory. The crowd never knew his name, and he preferred it that way. He was not there to be known. He was there to stand for those who could no longer stand for themselves. On the other side of this story stood the man who would test that silence. The Russian colonel. His reputation was not whispered, was shouted. A career officer who had risen through the ranks, not by honor but by arrogance. His chest gleamed with medals, some earned, many not. His voice carried the tone of command, but never of respect. He had attended diplomatic events across Europe and Asia, leaving behind a trail of offended generals, insulted veterans, and broken traditions. In Moscow, he was untouchable. Abroad, he carried himself as if the world was a stage for his dominance. For him, ceremony was weakness. Respect was a tool to be bent. Wherever he went, he tested limits, pushing, mocking, daring others to stand up to him. And now, In Washington, he saw the tomb guard not as a symbol of sacrifice, but as a target for his pride. To him, the silence was not sacred, it was submission, and submission was something he demanded. Between these two men stood the stage itself, Arlington National Cemetery. The air there was unlike anywhere else. Visitors often said they could feel the silence before they even reached the tomb. The endless rows of white marble headstones stretched across the green hills like an army frozen in eternal formation. Each stone marked a story: a father, a mother, a son, a daughter, lives cut short but remembered in perfect order. At the heart of it all lay the tomb of the unknown soldier, guarded 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, through hurricane winds and blistering heat, through snowstorms and lightning. No matter the condition, the guard marched. He never broke formation. He never abandoned post, because that silence was more than ritual, it was sacred ground. Tourists who visited often left changed. Children asked quiet questions. Veterans stood with tears in their eyes. Even leaders of nations, when they approached the tomb, bowed their heads or laid wreaths with trembling hands. But the Russian colonel had no intention of bowing to him. Arlington was just another stage to show the world his defiance. As he arrived, some whispered of his past offenses. A year earlier he had mocked a British officer during a remembrance service in London. Months before that, he had interrupted a ceremony in Poland, dismissing it as theatrics. And now, here he was, in front of the most sacred post of all. The guard didn't know all of this, but he didn't need to. He only needed to stand, because his vow was not to argue or resist, it was simply to hold the line of silence. The sky itself seemed to watch. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the marble. The air was heavy, the kind of stillness that made even the strongest hearts beat slower. The crowd of tourists stood hushed, as if sensing they were about to witness more than a ceremony. They were about to witness a test. In the center of it all, the guard stood motionless, his uniform perfect, his gloves spotless. His rifle gleamed in the sunlight, but his eyes never moved. He was a statue made of flesh and bone, carrying centuries of tradition on his shoulders. And then the colonel's boots struck stone. The clash between honor and arrogance was no longer distant. It had arrived, step by step, echoing across sacred ground. The guard had no weapon but silence. The colonel had no weapon but pride, and the world was about to discover which was stronger. The first clash was not in words, but in posture. The colonel stopped a few feet from the guard, planting his boots as if he were claiming territory. His medals caught the sunlight, flashing like small, deliberate signals of power. He folded his hands behind his back and leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing with amusement. To him, the silence was a game, a weakness waiting to be broken. The guard did not move. He did not even acknowledge the colonel's presence. His eyes remained fixed ahead, his jaw locked with the same precision as the rifle on his shoulder. The crowd shifted uneasily. A murmur rippled from one side to the other. Parents whispered for their children to stay close. Some veterans in the audience straightened, sensing disrespect long before it was fully shown. And the reporters, always hungry for their cameras higher, red lights glowing as lenses zoomed in. The colonel's lips curled into a smirk. He took a slow step closer, the heel of his boot scraping against stone in a deliberate act of intrusion. So, he muttered loudly enough for the first rows to hear, "This is the famous American discipline, a statue in uniform. How impressive." A few chuckles came from a group of foreign officials standing behind him, but the sound quickly died under the heavy silence of the plaza. No one dared laugh too loudly here. Not in this place. The guard remained still. The colonel tilted his head, studying him like a predator circling prey. "You ignore me, or you simply cannot move without command. Tell me, what use is a soldier who cannot act on his own?" His words dripped with contempt, but the guard gave no answer. For the guard, silence was not weakness. It was his oath. He had trained for years to endure worse than insults. Rain, fire, exhaustion, and mockery, none of it mattered. His vow was clear. He stood for the fallen, and nothing could move him from that duty. The crowd's tension deepened. A child, no older than 6, peeked from behind his mother's coat, whispering, "Why is that man being mean?" The mother pulled the child close, shaking her head with quiet urgency. Nearby, a veteran clenched his fists. His knuckles whitened, as memories surged. Comrades lost, funerals attended, flags folded. To him, the guard was not just a soldier, it was every soldier. Watching this disrespect cut deep, and yet he, like the guard, remained silent. The colonel, frustrated by the lack of response, escalated. He took another step forward, entering the invisible line of space that surrounded the guard's post. His shadow now overlapped with the guard's boots. He chuckled darkly, shaking his head. So disciplined, so silent, yet silence. It is just another kind of obedience, isn't it? Perhaps you will obey me. The tourists gasped softly. Still, the guard did not flinch. The colonel turned to the crowd, spreading his arms as though putting the guard on display. Behold, this is your great tradition. A man told to stand still, and so he stands. No thought, no courage, just obedience, dressed as honor. The words hung heavy. Some tourists shuffled uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene or keep filming. The reporters, sensing the story building, zoomed closer. One cameraman whispered to another, "This is going viral. Look at him, he's taunting a tomb guard." The guard's stillness began to transform in the eyes of the crowd. At first, it was just discipline. Now it was defiance. The colonel's insults, his arrogance, his smirk, none of it penetrated. The guard's silence grew louder, heavier, until even the boldest voices in the crowd dared not interrupt. But arrogance does not stop when ignored, it grows. The colonel stepped directly in front of the guard now, less than a foot away. His face hovered at eye level, eyes burning with mockery. "Look at me," he hissed, though he knew the guard would not. "Do you think you honor your dead by ignoring the living? You are nothing but a puppet in a parade." Gasps rose from the crowd. One tourist muttered, "This is too far." A veteran's voice, low but steady, whispered, "Stand firm, soldier, stand firm." The guard's eyes remained forward. His breathing was steady, his posture unshaken. The silence grew so heavy that even the sound of a bird's wings overhead startled the crowd. The colonel, now visibly irritated, circled around the guard. His boots clicked against the stone, echoing louder and louder. He leaned in, whispering words only the guard could hear. "Your silence insults me. Perhaps you fear me. Perhaps you know better than to challenge me." Nothing, not a blink. The colonel's smirk faltered for a moment. For the first time, he felt the strange weight of the guard's defiance. It was not submission, it was strength. Strength so controlled, so absolute, that arrogance could not penetrate it. And the crowd felt it too. The mothers holding their children closer, the veterans standing taller, the reporters filming every second. All of them knew something was happening that would be remembered. But arrogance rarely retreats. The colonel took one last step forward, so close his chest nearly brushed the guard's rifle. He straightened his back, raised his chin, and barked a command that cracked through the silence like thunder. "Salute me." The plaza froze. The child clutched his mother's arm. Veterans held their breath. Reporters leaned forward, cameras trembling. The guard did not move. For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. 3 long seconds where silence itself screamed. The colonel's face reddened. His pride had been challenged in front of the world. His smirk twisted into a scowl. He jabbed a finger toward the guard's chest, sneering, "You dishonor yourself. You dishonor me. You dishonor." And then, for the first time, the guard moved. Not a step, not a salute. A single, precise shift of his rifle against the stone. The sound cracked like a thunderclap. The crowd gasped as one. The veteran's eyes widened. The colonel flinched. His words cut short. It was not a salute. It was not disobedience. It was discipline, sharp, exact, unshaken. And suddenly, the balance of power shifted. The colonel had spent minutes trying to break the silence. But in one disciplined movement, the guard reminded everyone that silence was unbreakable. The crowd leaned forward, breathless, waiting to see what would happen next. Because, in that razor-thin moment, everyone knew the truth. The real battle had only just begun. The sound of the rifle's sharp adjustment still echoed when the colonel's smirk collapsed into a scowl. His pride, already tested, now burned like fire in his chest. The crowd's reaction only stoked his fury. He had meant to humiliate the guard, to prove that arrogance outweighed silence. Instead, he felt the weight of eyes watching him falter. He couldn't allow that. Not here, not in front of cameras, not in front of strangers, not in front of history. So he took one more step forward, breaking the invisible line that even the boldest visitors never dared cross. His polished boot landed inches from the guard's own. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of air that seemed to strip oxygen from the plaza. "You will salute me," the colonel barked, his voice cracking with anger. He jabbed his finger into the guard's chest once, twice, like a man testing the strength of a wall. The guard did not flinch, but every veteran in the audience stiffened. To touch the tomb guard was unthinkable. It was not just disrespect, it was desecration. One old Marine whispered through clenched teeth, "Cross the line. He's crossed the damn line." The colonel leaned closer, his spit flecking the guard's immaculate uniform. "You stand here as if you are stone, but you are flesh. Boy, flesh obeys." The silence answered him louder than any words, and then it happened. The guard moved, not wildly, not in anger, but with the sharp precision of a thunderbolt contained in human form. His rifle, held steady at his shoulder, swept down in a crisp arc, the butt striking the stone with a sound that cracked like a gunshot. The motion was so fast, so flawless, that even the colonel recoiled instinctively. The crowd erupted in gasps. Some stepped backward. Children clutched tighter to their parents. Reporters nearly dropped their cameras, then scrambled to steady them, red lights glowing brighter as lenses captured every frame. The guard's voice followed, calm, sharp, trained. It was the first sound he had made since the colonel's arrival. "Sir, you are in violation of this post. Step back immediately." The words sliced through the air. They were not shouted, yet they thundered louder than the colonel's bark. Every syllable was clipped with authority, honed by centuries of tradition. Colonel froze. For the first time, he was not the one commanding, he was the one being commanded. The guard's eyes, steady and unwavering, locked forward. He did not look at the colonel, yet the colonel felt the full weight of that gaze. It was not the look of a man confronting another man, it was the weight of every soldier, every sacrifice, every fallen comrade standing silently through him. The silence afterward was deafening. The entire plaza held its breath. The colonel tried to smirk again, to regain control, but the corner of his mouth twitched with unease. He jabbed a finger toward the guard once more, though now it trembled slightly. You dare to address me like clack." The rifle struck the stone again, sharper, louder. The colonel flinched visibly. The guard's voice followed, unshaken. "Remove yourself. This ground is not yours to command." The crowd erupted, not in noise, in an audible wave of gasps and whispers. A child whispered to his mother. He spoke, as if they had just heard a statue come to life. Veterans in the crowd straightened, their chests swelling with pride. One man, tears brimming in his eyes, whispered, "That's discipline. That's honor." The colonel's pride, however, shattered. His face flushed crimson. To be corrected, to be commanded, in front of strangers, cameras, and witnesses, it was humiliation more cutting than any insult. His hands trembled with rage as he leaned in, hissing, "You think you can command me? I am a colonel of the Russian Federation. You will." The guard did not wait. In one fluid, precise motion, he brought his rifle across his body, lowering it into a ready position. The steel gleamed under the sun, his gloves immaculately firm, his heel clicked as he shifted. Stance perfect, practiced, unstoppable. It was not aggression, it was warning. A movement so sharp, so calculated, it froze the entire plaza. Security officers at the edges of the ceremony stirred, their hands moving to radios. Reporters leaned so close they nearly toppled forward, desperate to capture every millisecond. The crowd, every soul in that plaza felt their breath caught in their throats. The guard had not attacked. He had not broken discipline, but with a single motion, he had declared a truth older than any colonel's medals. This post was sacred. This silence was untouchable. The colonel stumbled back a half step before catching himself, glancing wildly at the cameras. His arrogance demanded he recover, to show no weakness. But the damage was already done. The guard's discipline had turned the crowd against him. Children stared wide-eyed. Veterans stood at attention. Tourists who minutes earlier had shuffled nervously, now raised their phones with steady hands, capturing history. The guard's voice rang once more, unwavering. "This ground honors the unknown. You will show respect or you will leave." The colonel's face twisted with rage and disbelief. No one had ever spoken to him like this. Not generals, not diplomats, not officials in gilded halls. But here, on this sacred stone, a silent soldier had cut him down without ever raising his voice. The silence that followed was absolute, and then the colonel made his final mistake. Humiliated, desperate to reclaim authority, he shoved the guard's shoulder. It was not hard, not violent, but enough of physical violation of the unbroken line. The entire plaza erupted in outrage. Shouts rang out from veterans, gasps from families. Reporters shouted questions into microphones. Security officers surged forward, their radios crackling. But through the chaos, the guard remained unshaken. His boots held the line. His rifle gleamed in his hands. His posture was perfect, his silence unbreakable. And with that silence, the world understood. The colonel had crossed a line no arrogance could erase. The shove landed like a crack across sacred silence. The colonel's hand, arrogant and careless, had broken the invisible shield that no one dared touch. In that instant, the air itself seemed to turn against him. The crowd erupted in one unified gasp, sharp, horrified, electric, unbelievable. A tourist muttered, "Disgraceful." A veteran barked, his voice trembling with fury. Parents pulled their children closer, covering young eyes from the spectacle. Reporters shouted questions over one another, their cameras firing in rapid bursts. Red recording lights painted the plaza like warning signals. But in the middle of chaos, the guard did not flinch. Instead, he acted with mechanical precision. His heel clicked against stone, and his rifle snapped into position, angled across his chest in a flawless movement. So sharp, it echoed like thunder. The motion was neither attack nor surrender, it was a wall. An immovable line drawn in silence. The colonel staggered back, his smug confidence cracking. The guard's eyes locked forward, never wavered, but the discipline in his stance spoke, louder than words. "You have gone too far." Security personnel surged forward now, breaking the invisible barrier that had always been preserved for ceremony alone. Their boots thundered across the plaza as radios barked orders. Two men in suits moved directly toward the colonel, speaking rapid commands in clipped tones. "Step back, sir. Step away now." The colonel turned, sputtering with rage. You cannot tell me, but his protest drowned beneath the tidal wave of crowd reaction. Tourists jeered, veterans roared in defiance, and phones caught every second. One elderly Marine, standing at rigid attention, raised his voice above the chaos. "Show respect. You don't touch a tomb guard." His words struck the crowd like a spark, igniting a chorus of shouts. "Disrespect. Shame. Get him out of here." The colonel, red-faced and flailing, found himself not commanding, but cornered. He spun toward the guard again, desperate to reclaim power. But the soldier stood like stone, immovable, untouchable, eternal. The contrast was devastating. Arrogance unraveling beside discipline unshaken. The guard's silence thundered louder than the colonel's rage. And then, the final blow, not from the guard, but from authority itself. A senior official, flanked by security, stepped into the plaza. His voice boomed with the weight of law and tradition. "Colonel, you are out of line. This ceremony is sacred. You will stand down." The colonel's protest caught in his throat. His eyes darted to the crowd, hundreds of witnesses, dozens of cameras, every lens capturing his humiliation. His pride demanded defiance, but the world had already judged him. Two guardsmen in suits closed in. His arms were taken not violently, but firmly, without room for argument. The colonel tried to pull free, but the crowd's jeers cut deeper than any grip. Disgrace, shame, echoed from every corner. Reporters' voices overlapped. "Colonel, why did you touch the guard? Do you regret your actions? Are you aware you're being recorded?" The questions peppered him like bullets, but no answer could save him now. His face twisted, a mask of rage and fear, as he was escorted away from the tomb. His boots, once sharp with arrogance, now dragged against the stone. And still the guard remained. He had not broken stance. He had not lowered his discipline. Even as chaos swirled, even as security dragged the colonel away, the guard stood in perfect stillness. His rifle gleamed. His uniform was immaculate. His eyes were steady, unshaken. The symbolism was undeniable. While arrogance collapsed under the weight of its own pride, discipline endured. While chaos screamed, silence stood eternal. The cameras captured it all. Within minutes, the footage would race across the world on news broadcasts, on phones, on social media. Millions would watch the moment when a soldier's silence shattered, arrogance louder than any shout. And as the plaza slowly quieted, the guard resumed his post. With flawless precision, he adjusted his rifle, turned, and resumed his measured march before the tomb. Heel-toe, each step echoed like a vow renewed. The crowd hushed, now watched in awe. No one spoke, no one moved. Tears welled in the eyes of veterans. Parents held their children tighter. The silence of Arlington had been tested, and it had triumphed. For the guard, nothing had changed. His vow was the same as it had been that morning, the same as yesterday, the same as tomorrow. But for everyone else who had witnessed it, meaning of that vow had never been clearer. Arrogance had come to break silence, but silence had broken arrogance instead.